Welcome back. We rejoin our spacefaring colony adventure in something of an unusual time, in that I have a lot of resources and a lack of pawns to process them. When it is being generous like it is now, the incredible amount of sheer unremittent stuff save our ship throws at you to work with is functionally unmanageable for a colony of my current size, so rather than wholly deconstruct every scrap of the salvage I collect, I have only been having my pawns cut out the things I want to add to my ship directly, and then deconstructing major features and equipment pieces. Sure, there is a lot of plasteel in the holes and armor plating, but salvaging all of that is slow, and were I to try, everyone would be so busy deconstructing the stuff that nobody would have time to do anything with the stuff you get out of it. It's gotten so bad that the only time I really have to collect any of the stuff that I'm deconstructing is in the middle of firefights, since I can't move shipwrecks around during that time for further processing, but of course ship combat means even more shipwrecks to salvage, and no matter how inefficiently I blow them apart, we end up right back at square one. I do at least have some basic ranged weaponry now, so I'm not stuck trying to run down things to eat them, but I don't even bother salvaging anything from these three, entirely because I don't have space on the map to take them. With my resource needs mostly solved, the name of the game is bulking, and bulking hard. Combat in Save Our Ship is functionally a game of solitaire, where the colony is in an arms race against itself. And for all the work the modders did to introduce spice and variability into ship-on-ship combat on an individual basis, on a meta level, your success is really determined by your build's answer to one question, which is, does your ship have enough heatsink capacity and weapons to defeat the heatsink capacity and weapons of the strongest AI ship at your current combat level? If the answer is yes, you're gonna win every engagement every time, and there's nothing the game can do about it. If the answer is no, then the first time you get unlucky, you will get steamrolled, and there's nothing you could do about it. The real battle, then, is determining how to best balance defense and offense, and we are at a dangerous inflection point, where enemy ship designs have gotten a power spike from fielding a wider variety of heavy weapons that generate more heat than I can absorb. The solution to this is, of course, more heat sinks. Quite a lot more, in fact. Better shield and shield regeneration is the only meaningful counter to more powerful ships that can sustain bombardment indefinitely, because armor wears out, coolant tanks were always a trap since they add combat power without increasing your heat dissipation rate or DPS, capital weapons jack your combat power something fierce without providing a commensurate DPS increase, and even point defense weapons fall into the background as heat generation from torpedo batteries is outscaled by more sustainable energy weapon fire. Heat sinks, though? Heat sinks are forever. Turns out all you need to win space battles is to build barely enough weapons to overheat an enemy, and then put the rest of your resources into turning your ship into the world's most environmentally unfriendly Bitcoin miner. Who'd have thought? Naturally, you can't just have heat sinks, otherwise you'd be unable to collect more scrap, and pirate encounters like this are ideal for that particular purpose. I have no idea if you even can succeed with parley attempts, but this one certainly fails, and I'm thrust into combat with a fleet of assorted junk ships. This is the best case scenario for scrap farming. More ships means there's more likelihood that I can successfully snipe out the control consoles from one of them without damaging too much else, and the ships individually are far weaker without having the same AI impetus to run away when you would normally encounter a ship that is much stronger than you. This is kind of a defeat in detail situation, because larger single-target ships are shielded at my current threat level, which is hard to punch through and takes a long time, but these smaller ships, despite adding up in total to my current threat level, aren't sharing their heat-sinking capacity, and that will allow me to snipe out problematic weapons and take them down without too many issues. Of course, that's great and all, but in this case the pirates run like little rat cowards the instant they realize they can't crack my shields, but still, the principle applies. At the very least, 30-odd personal shuttles worth of material is a couple more relatively free heat sinks. In the interests of, actually completing the game, it's also far past time that I started trying to work on my crippling pocket dimension usage. For all that it saved me a bunch of trouble, I am no longer dependent on having a pocket dimension to keep my colony running, and I have plenty of space on my ship earmarked for habitation purposes, and have had for a while now. On the ship side, at least, this mostly just involves slamming down a few rooms to satisfy technical requirements and cranking out enough silver floor tile to keep some of my more special snowflakes from having poverty-induced stress attacks, so this wasn't even all that difficult. What was difficult was getting all the junk out of the pocket dimension and back onto my ship. I don't exactly have a storage solution on board so much as I have a miscellaneous pile of garbage, and while several years of steady withdrawals have depleted my reserves of esoteric tchotchke, it has far from eliminated them. And the resulting waterfall of money, vomiting thousands of stacks of raw everything onto my ship, is, disruptive, to say the least. So while that's going on, I'm also doing some ship restructuring. The original ship I flew to space with never really got removed, in so much as it was just kind of absorbed into the surrounding superstructure, and that has resulted in this ugly little tumor of a building in the middle of what would otherwise be a well-thought-out space brick. Well, it's time to excise that, because I want this place operational, and the pathing inefficiencies that this stupid tumor of a building has caused are driving me absolutely mental. Because I'm an intelligent individual who thinks these things out ahead of time, I also started doing this in the middle of a ship battle, which, as you can see, has, deleterious effects on the game engine. Yeah, that's the other reason I want the pocket dimension gone, because this place is chunky. It also glitched my guns out so that I can't return fire, but honestly, that isn't much of a concern, because the enemies are gonna run out of railgun shells before I run out of shields. With most of my ship reformatting finished, my heatsink capacity approaching a level I would describe as barely adequate, and enough weapons to actually engage in combat with some level of reliability, it's time to do one of my favorite pastimes here on the Rim: mech hunting. High-level mech ships oftentimes have a small amount of archotech ship parts used in their design, and, well, eventually I plan on being able to make those myself. That's a ways off yet, so I'll be attacking every mech ship I can in order to try and get lucky and get some of them. I'm only really interested in two, to be fair. The first is an archotech shield generator, which only produces 75% of the heat a normal shield will when it blocks impacts. And this adds up fast. The second, and less of a priority, are the archotech heat sinks, which are basically just slightly upgraded versions of the regular kind with a bit of passive energy recovery. They're not fantastic, but they're good enough to bother collecting. Ship stripping isn't my goal here, and I don't actually want to fight the mechs, so I opted just to bomb the daylights out of this ship for maximum crew killing potential, and only worried about sparing the bits that I couldn't get elsewhere. And for my efforts, I was awarded with 5 anti-entropic heat sinks, which are kind of irrelevant when compared to the giant brick of heatsink cheese that my ship has become, and a single archotech shield generator. The way I layered my shields means I'm gonna need at least 2 more at a minimum, but it will at least help out with anything firing at the upper right quadrant of my ship. While we're hunting, after many years of labor on the part of my colonists, the time finally comes to say goodbye to the pocket dimension. I would say that I feel sentimental, but the second map has been lagging my game like you would not believe, and to be quite honest, I'm just glad to see the back of the thing. It's a great mechanic, but the game just cannot handle multiple colonies at once. So now that that mess is out of the way, there is one last thing that I need to do with my ship before we can start pushing towards endgame. That is to put some guns on the poor thing. You thought 1 bank of railguns was a lot of railguns? Well, how about 2? Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, did you only think I was going to make 2? No, you're wrong. Thou shall, after all, count to 3. Of course, the one issue with packing harder than a donkey in a drug cartel is, however, that now that I have all these guns, nobody wants to mess with me. Literally, there are like 5 ship types that I know of with a high enough threat rating to even aggro onto me, and all of them are so large that I have to either blast them apart to salvage them, or discard them entirely because I don't have enough space on the map to bring them over whole. This is also something of a moot point, because all of them will run away from me the instant they see me. To solve this, I tried turning the entire butt end of my ship into engine emplacements, which, well, I still won't be fast. Like, I won't even be moderately slow, but I should, in theory, be able to slug our way up to our enemies and then drain their engines by the time they realize they can't defeat me. Maybe. This theory, when combined with preferentially shooting out ship engines, does prove to be successful, and after multiple days of agonizingly slow combat, I net myself a Glitterworld Dreadnought, which is one of the largest and most dangerous ships in the pack, with only superficial damage. These ships are enormous. There is absolutely no way I could have salvaged them before I got rid of the pocket dimension, and I will have to manually secure the ship, cut it into chunks in its current position, and then bring the chunks back to make it work, but this inconvenience is well worth it for how much stuff these have on them. To prepare for this boarding eventuality, I've been keeping it in orbit for around a month now, which has allowed most of its crew to starve or die from mental break-induced injuries, and we're just about ready to start munching. This process sounds far more interesting than it actually is. In reality, a good 90% of the Dreadnought's crew is dead, eaten, or otherwise indisposed by the time I head over there, and there's really only a token resistance to my pawns blasting their way onto the bridge and hacking the controls. And with the ship secured, I can then set my team loose on identifying easily deconstructed weak points and part the thing out and start moving it over. Once the away team is back, the real work of actually taking the thing apart begins. It should go without saying, but I will be cloaking as much as possible until I have processed the bulk of this dead weight, but until then I still need to prepare myself for combat in a way that will minimize material losses from enemy fire breaking up all of my nice fresh salvage. My shields can cover a lot, but they can't cover an entire second ship, so rather than actually take anything apart just yet, I opted to have my teams cut things into more smaller pieces and just kind of jigsaw them under my bubbles. This also has the side benefit of moving all the stuff closer, which saves travel time, and honestly that might be more of a benefit than not losing the wreck in the first place. Now, you might be asking yourself, Goose, what could you possibly need all of these resources for? Why, dear viewer, it's simple. More weapons, of course. You didn't seriously think that I was only going to make 3 banks of railguns, did you? That would be ridiculous. At my threat rating, if I can't neuter a ship's capital weapon array in one strike, I'm pretty much toast no matter how much shielding I have, so of course we're going to make more weapons. And this is why. This is a Dreadnought. Pay no attention to the "It's a Fleet" message, the other 2 ships are basically glorified shuttles. This is, as far as I'm aware, the single largest ship in the entire mod, and because of how my threat rating is stacked, it will basically be the only ship I ever see for the rest of the game. This thing is also absurdly powerful, like to the point where I have been under cloak for the past year and a half preparing to take one of these things out, because if you don't have a solid alpha strike that can crack its shield and break all of its weapon emplacements, or just literally an entire map of heatsinks, you are toast. I lack the latter, but, well, I'll let the former speak for itself. The first volley is carefully staggered to just barely force the ship to drop its shields for a heat purge, before the second punch comes in and wipes out all but 3 of its capital weapon emplacements. Even that proves to only barely be enough, and I have to do a quick purge and dump myself to recharge my shields before its second volley hits, but we do eventually take out all of the remaining capital weapons and carve into the hole enough to expose internals. The name of the game here, by the way, is Staggered Fire. In addition to getting past those pesky shields, when you are, as I am, firing 250-odd railgun slugs at a time, the overlapping explosion effects tend to cancel themselves out, and that reduces a lot of your effective damage. This is fine for shield breaking because shield damage is calculated differently, but if you want to actually break the ship, you will want to put a bit of delay between the volleys. From then on, it's pretty much Jover for the poor thing. For all its bulk, it's really not designed to take a beating once the shields and hull are stripped off it, and the third volley does massive damage to all of its non-torpedo weapon systems, which seals the deal. Torpedoes aren't really all that good at anything other than putting pressure on ships who need to vent heat, and my heatsinks are doing that perfectly fine on their own, thanks. So I am free to take the thing apart in my own time, and the ship is almost entirely disabled by the time that it starts trying to run. Really, the biggest limitation here was my energy reserves, because as it turns out, shooting a quarter of your ship's mass in railgun fire every 45 seconds is less than friendly to your capacitor banks. Who would have thought? So anyway, now that we have proven that we can effectively win any engagement in the entire mod with the power of evaporating the front half of any ship that attacks us, literally, what do we do now? Well, we beat the game, obviously. There are 2 endings that are added by Save Our Ship. One is a variant of the vanilla ending where you have a glorified Protect the Device mission that lasts 15 days on the planet's surface. This gives you a wingding, you put the wingding on your ship, and you fly off into the sunset to a new planet. Cool. Great. This is not a very interesting ending because the thing with Save Our Ship is that all the cheese tech with shields I've been using for anti-pawn defenses in space also works on the ground, so the raids aren't gonna be much of a challenge. The second ending, though, is a bit more interesting. Now that we're in orbit, our scanners can pick up the source of the emitter that keeps sending out psychic drones and psychic Sues across the planet, and we can kill it. The game helpfully warns us that this will be a very challenging mission, and it's not wrong, because I do find it very challenging to catch. We're so overpowered that endgame mission ships are now running in terror from us. This is not supposed to happen. Yeah, this is going to be a problem. Fine. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. So while we're waiting, here's a fun fact. Rimworld, when it builds family trees for members of your colony, will try to generally make members of a pawn's family match the faction that they were originally part of. For pawns you recruit from hostile factions, this will, by design, tend to result in their family members raiding you, resulting in lovely cinematic tragedies or great heroic victories. This has an interesting side effect, though, which is that if you only have one pawn from the faction that raids you, family membership rolls from that faction's raiders can only happen on that one particular pawn, resulting in fun situations like with Gambosa. Gambosa is the only pawn in my colony who was a member of the hostile spacer faction used to generate the pawns on enemy ships, and because of this mechanic, their raids have resulted in the deaths of both of her parents, 10 of her brothers, 7 of her sisters, both of her grandfathers, 7 of her nieces, 3 of her nephews, 4 uncles, 2 cousins, 22 grandaunts, 15 granduncles, 2 grandnieces, 1 grandnephew, 12 cousins once removed, and 5 of her kin, which is what you get when the game realizes that it's tracking relations so distant that the English language does not have words to accurately describe them. As you can imagine, this does not tend to make Gambosa very happy, and between that and her psychite withdrawal, she is currently not enjoying life all that much up in space. Here's another fun fact. Chemical rocket engines, contrary to what you may think, actually kind of suck for space travel. Like, they're big, they're heavy, their thrust-to-weight ratio is pathetic, and the energy density of chemical reactions tends to scale with how dangerous the reactants are, which encourages rocket engineers to play Would You Rather with concoctions that universally confuse the GHS pictogram chart with a game of lockout bingo. Because of this, in the 1950s, several bright sparks in the American aerospace industry came up with a better solution. Rocket engines that use nuclear warheads as fuel. This is a 100% real thing. It's called Project Orion. Look it up. It turns out that nukes, probably, would make really good rocket fuel. Their thrust-to-weight ratio is fantastic. They don't usually explode when they're not supposed to. You can fit thousands of them on an appropriately sized ship, and in an alternate future where several nations didn't choose to comment on the obvious consequences of detonating several hundred highly radioactive bombs in low planetary orbit, Elon Musk would probably have nuclear launch capabilities. Leaving aside that particularly volatile piece of nightmare fuel, I have no intention of ever returning to the planet's surface, and frankly, scouring it with nuclear fire is probably an improvement. So I made, just a few of these things. Forget moving things with levers, all we need is our Lord and Savior U-235. And despite literally surrounding 70% of my ship with as many engines as I could fit under my shields, this still was not enough to chase down one of those stupid emitters. In the end, I just got lucky and found a particularly stupid one that made the clinically fatal mistake of allowing me to get a single volley of railgun shells off on it, and that was all it took to take out its engines. And also the back third of the ship. From there, it's a simple matter of chewing the thing down to eliminate most of the mechs and not moving in with the shuttle, because at some point I accidentally deconstructed my launch bay. Okay, one more second. Righto. We are now the proud owner of one launch bay and can now actually leave the ship. Cool. I ship my crew over, clean up the mechs, hack the ship, yank it back, all in a day's work, problem solved. My reward for this, in addition to some salvage, is the ability to create something called an archotech spore. Spoilers, it's a doohickey that turns your ship AI into an archotech. I unfortunately can't make it just yet because I have no uranium, because I turned it all into nukes for some mysterious reason, but we can fix that problem really easily now that I can chase down ships again, so no worries. The next little bit of getting the spore online involves a whole lot of reading, but we don't do that on Goose channel, so here's the executive summary. TLDR, we have an archotech spore, otherwise known as a moldy green lollipop, that lets us do stuff and things. The first is to stuff Brendan inside of it as the controlling consciousness and begin the slow and arduous process of transforming him into an archotech superbrain. He isn't gone, though, because we can now create something called a form gel out of him, which is basically just a human analog made of nanites that's functionally identical to a regular colonist, except that they have all of the obvious advantages that come from being made out of a swarm of super overpowered archotech nanites. And also a mood debuff. And also some non-obvious advantages, like the plus 1000 base neural heat limit, which, yes, that seems reasonable. At this point, the Brendan Gestalt would largely be content to sit around thinking deep thoughts and contemplating its navel until it eventually evolved into an archotech for several thousand years, but it's kind of still on board a ship that's getting regularly attacked and is also sort of one of our colonists, so it's willing to help around the place and teach us how to make cool archotech things via research and occasionally give us presents as long as we keep it from dying and keep it happy. There are two ways of doing this, or keeping it happy, that is. The first is meditation, because on top of everything else, the giant green lollipop is basically an anima tree, and one of the researches we have lets it give out Psylink upgrades. Sure. Or we can instead placate it with human sacrifice. For once, I'm going to choose the option that doesn't result in massive war crimes, though this has more to do with my lack of prisoners than any particular moral quandary on my part. In the meantime, dealing with this archotech spore and its subsequent research projects is our only priority. There are no other ships in the game capable of presenting a threat, so other than the bare minimum of work required to keep people fed and the ship operational, we are going to be devoting ourselves 100% to meditation and research. Archotech research in any other context and in any other situation would be fantastically overpowered. With it, your spore can learn to create and give gifts of just about every type of archotech thing in the game. Your colonists can unlock a host of powerful new plant and animal variants and ship upgrades and utility options, and in general, your colony will slowly begin transcending into a proto-archotech civilization. We aren't actually going to bother with most of that, though, because it doesn't actually matter. And this is my biggest complaint with Save Our Ship, which is by the time you unlock all the cool archotech research, your colony, by definition, has already eliminated all of the problems that tech would actually be good at solving. Like, sure, there are marginal upgrades to be had, but I already overkill every ship in the pack at this point, and the only issue my colony suffers from right now is crippling game lag, and that's kind of what we call an out-of-context problem. So instead, I direct my colonists to begin researching the location of the 4 wingdings that my archotech needs to speedrun its ascension process, because, well, it may be willing to sit around for a few thousand years, I certainly am not. The first doodad is located in orbit, on some piece of junk the game tries to convince you is a heavily defended terraforming station that's been taken over by pirates. It is wrong in every respect about this. The station is not heavily defended at all, and in fact is substantially weaker than the ship I had to shoot down to get the spore recipe in the first place. It's not defended by pirates, and is instead infested with mechanoids, and as far as I can tell, the only terraforming capabilities this thing has is being able to blot out the sun because it's really big. It, like everything else in the game, also tries to run away from me. Unfortunately for it, I have 98 fully stocked nuclear engines and nothing to use them on, so that attempt is met with a rather excessive amount of failure, in the form of 200 plus railgun shells simultaneously impacting its engine bays. Once I'm done carving the thing up like a Thanksgiving turkey, I send Brendan over in a shuttle, hack the ship, grab the pillar, load it up, and then head back to mine. No time to waste, we have 3 more of these things to grab. The second target is located on a moon. Presumably one of many, given the statistically implausible number of eclipses we keep having, but I digress. Apparently some mechs decided they wanted to do secret experiments on it, or something. Who cares? Point remains, I want it. Now, my original plan here was to have one of my pawns drop Brendan off, and then have Brendan do some Solid Snake malarkey to break into the facility, steal the pillar, and then leave. That was the original plan. The problem with this plan, that I only remembered after the fact, was the mechs. And, there are a lot of mechs on this map. Like, way too many. That's fine, though. I have a plan B. Did you know that mechs can be affected by psychic abilities like Berserk Pulse? Yeah, weird but true. Normally I just never bother with it because shooting them is usually more reliable, but they can be sent into Berserk Rages, which for them is referred to as Scrambled Aggression Judgment. It isn't quite as effective as it is on humanoid targets, but that doesn't really matter when you have 3000 neural heat, and the best part is I don't even need to worry about the psi focus cost, because I can just have Brendan pick off a few of the weaker ones and his sword will top him right back up. So, go gadget, angry psychic archotech blender man. The one drawback is that this is very slow, like really slow, and also 3000 neural heat may be stupid on the face of it, but it's also not infinite, and I only regenerate 4.4 a second, so it will run out at some point, and that means it's time to use Brendan's other stupidly overpowered ability. You remember all that honor I grabbed way back when I was monopolizing the human trafficking market? Well, actually no, maybe that isn't the right question. Let me instead ask you this. Did you know that the Fallen Empire can conduct airstrikes on the moon? So anyway, after stealthily eliminating all of the mechs quickly and silently via a several-day-long campaign of sustained orbital bombardment and psychic assault, courtesy of one dude with a really high IQ, we have Brendan wander in, grab the totem thingy, and leave. Conveniently, all of the turret emplacements don't count for securing the pillar for some reason, but sure, whatever, not gonna question it. The third pillar is located in the center of a giant tribal encampment, defended by about half a raid's worth of well-ish armed tribals and some random archotech animals. I could very easily clear them out with the same strategy I used to handle the mechs, or just drop another dozen orbital strikes on them because yes, I still have more of them, but it turns out to not be necessary because the pillar is uninstallable, despite there being hostiles on the map. Kind of makes me seriously wonder whether I even needed to take out the mechs now, and I suspect the answer is no. But it was funny, so whatever. And the fourth pillar is located in an underground cave complex that, lagged my game out for like 5 minutes when we tried to load it. And then I couldn't land in it since, you know, it's an underground cave complex, so I made the shuttle return to my ship, except that just broke the game even harder, deleted the shuttle, and Brendan, and then crashed my game to desktop. I mean, this does make sense. The game did warn me that the pillar was defended by bugs, but I kinda thought it was talking about insects. Alright then, new plan. Fly down next to the giant insect cave, and then walk onto the map with a shuttle in caravan mode, plus a bunch of friends. They're not going to be sticking around, they're just there to clear the landing site so the shuttle can drop Brendan off and then wait without taking damage from bugs. We can then wait the contractually obligated 5 minutes to load the map, and boom! Welcome to Insect Land, complete with a giant shuttle that shouldn't have been able to enter the map, but did it anyway, because I love jank. My ground team can then clear out the area, I can kick Brendan out, clear a foothold, and then the ground team goes back into the shuttle to prevent them from being ganked, and then Brendan can run around spamming Berserk Pulse invisibility and stabbing things until all the bugs are dead. Once all the untethered bugs are dead or disabled, which is most of them, Brendan can then go up, grab the pillar, and then load it, and we can all begin the very slow process of getting Big Chungus to move through the cave, which has nothing to do with the bugs and everything to do with the massive cargo shuttle that is somehow flying through a cave. Also, there are totally spots to land shuttles here. I have no idea how I missed those earlier. Whatever. We got the pillar, let's go. And with that pillar retrieved and installed comes the end of the game. There's really nothing left to do but initiate the evolution, so I do that. I am a benevolent god, and allow my allies and enemies what mercy Brendan is capable of, which is not very much, and in the end the result is still the same, and my colony quickly becomes the uncontested ruler of the planet, and all who opposed me submit or die. Mostly die. Or possibly not, because at the end of the credits, everything goes back exactly the way it was before, and I can initiate another evolution immediately after. So, sure. That's fine, I guess. My colonists have been functionally immortal ever since I started eating super dreadnoughts for breakfast, so it's not like it really changes much. With that, however, I will end the series here. Royalty was an absolute delight to snap over my knee. Dimensional pockets were hilariously broken in ways that were entirely unplanned, but were also entirely enjoyable regardless, and Save Our Ship was fantastic as always, and at this point there really isn't much left for me to do with any of them. And so, there's nothing left to say, except thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed.